Hello, Professor Morgan here, and doing a little video here on the concept of writing book endings and how to get there. Yeah, because sometimes people start writing books and then they have no idea how to end, or they end poorly, and that's not good either. So let's get into it, shall we? All right. So when it comes to writing book endings, I'm reminded of this scene from Alice in Wonderland. And there's a scene where Alice meets the Cheshire Cat. And here's the actual scene right here. The cat says, "Where are you going?" Alice says, "Which way should I go?" And the cat says, "That depends on where you are going." Alice says, "I don't know." Then the cat says, "Well, then it doesn't matter which way you go." So again, this concept is if you don't have a destination in mind of where you're headed, then it's kind of really hard to uh, have your book heading in any particular direction. Which way you going? Which way? Where is this story going? Well, if you don't have a general idea, now it may change along the way, but at least you have to have a destination in mind. So this is an activity that I often do with in-person classes, and we'll just do a very abbreviated version of this. So let's say the premise here is that we've got I don't know, let's just say a 50-ish year old man, no magical powers, just you know, I don't know, fairly decent shape, kind of silly, kind of a goofy dude. Anyway, so he's standing on the shore over here, way over here. And his goal is to get to the top of this lighthouse. Whatever is at the top of this lighthouse is really what is is going to make him happy. And so as I do this in class, I say, okay, what's the first thing the man tries to do? And someone will say, oh, he tries to swim. And I'll say, okay, so he gets into the water and he realizes the water is super cold, and he's after just taking he's not a great swimmer, so he starts to try to swim a little bit, and he realizes, nah, I'm not going to be able to make it doing that way, so he goes back to the shore, and now he's cold and he's wet and he's a little tired, and then they say, oh, okay, there's no other ways to get, because it's out in the middle of this body of water. And then they say, well, he looks around and sees if he can find a boat. I'm like, oh, so he walks up another shore and he finds a rowboat. And he's like, okay, great. So he gets in the rowboat and he starts to row across. And then he gets attacked by and then people will say any number of things like a shark, an octopus, barracuda, I don't know, but this is whatever. So we'll go with it. And then anyway, we just keep throwing conflicts and obstacles for this person to overcome. And they eventually get here, like the door is locked, and they have to figure out a way to get in. And they finally get up, and they find, what do they find? Okay, and that is really kind of the key. It's like, okay, we've gone through all these adventures, we've gone through all these obstacles to get to the final point, and is the journey worth it? Well, what does he find? What do we know about the character, and what is this going to? What is the payoff there? Well, what happens when you get there to the end? Is there going to be a sense of satisfaction? Is there going to be a sense of um, like, what? That's it? Is there going to be a sense of, wait a minute, this isn't what I expected? It's like, this is what we know about the character, and then what he finds to make him happy does not connect with the character. So we want to make sure that we get there. And sometimes, that may not be something we may not know right off the top of the beginning when we start writing the story, but at least we have a destination in mind. And as we learn about the character and learn more about the story, then we can kind of understand that. So another point to consider is that when a reader and a writer, basically a writer makes a promise to the reader. I don't know, we'll call it a pinky promise. That basically says, hey, you know what? I'm going to tell you this, we're going to go through this story, and at the end, I'm going to basically promise to you that you're going to, I'm going to resolve this in a way that maybe not be what I mean, people don't necessarily like the endings of certain books or whatever, but to have stuff left open ended or not addressed or unsatisfied is not good. Okay. And if you don't keep that promise, then people can get very frustrated. And let me give you an example of this. Okay. If you, this is, I'm not keeping promise and what can make people kind of frustrated. So this is again an activity I do in like with my real life classes, but I'll do it here in this video. So imagine I'm standing in front of a classroom and I go, bump, bump, ba bump, bump, and then I don't say anything else. Okay, and eventually one of the students goes, bump, bump. I'm like, what, what are you doing? And they're like, well, you didn't finish. I'm like, I didn't finish what? Well, you did the first part, but you didn't do the last part. I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, you said the bump, bump, a bump, bump, but you didn't go bump, bump. That's you didn't finish the thing. I'm unsatisfied. I want more. I need to have it be completed. And I'm like, well, that's all you're getting. I'm not doing that bump, bump at the end. That's whatever. So that's the kind of the idea is if we've kind of set it up where we've kind of created a story where we have an ending that we don't really finish, then that's a problem. Okay. Now, one way to make it kind of relatively satisfactory, or again, when I finish reading the book, I'm like, okay, do I have a sense of like, okay, that was an interesting book. I feel satisfied with the ending. And part of that is kind of the circling back at the beginning of the story. The character or characters, or if it's character driven, or if it's plot, or then it's the plot introduces this basic premise, and then all these events happen during the course of the book, and then when we get to the end, really there's some sort of often it's like, okay, well, how, it's like you almost, it doesn't have to be like the character comes back to their hometown and we've seen how much they've changed as a person. Yet there's something that kind of, some sort of event, some sort of reflection, some sort of conversation or something that indicates the growth, the change, the kind of circles back to the beginning. The promise we made at the beginning and how we fulfilled the promise at the end. So that's a very, we can get into all sorts of ways about doing that, but often it's just like, it's like, okay, well, we just did this thing. It's like, okay, but I found that it's like, if you're going to do the bump bump, right? That bump bump is often when you kind of circle back and say, okay, I've now completed what was expected, and people are like, okay, I get it. All right. So, some final thoughts on writing the book endings of books. So, as a professor who teaches, creative writing classes and work with students who are working on their thesis projects, their graduate thesis projects, and their final novels. Their final drafts of novels and such. There's two challenges that students often run into, the first-time writers run into. Number one is they have a definite ending in mind, and they've locked in the ending, and to the point that as they're writing the story, and ideas come to them, and the characters grow and develop, and they start to get other ideas, they realize that the ending, the path they're taking isn't going to lead them to the end, or they have to take a real big, change a bunch of lanes to get to the ending that they had predetermined. Instead of realizing, okay, the ending it's almost like a working ending. It's like a theoretical ending. And is there a better way that we can twist that or adjust that ending to make it work with the story? The other challenge is students who have no ending in mind, and then they realize, oh, I reached the word count. This is a good place to stop, and it's like, what? It's like, well, I made it to the word count, so here's the end of the book. And I'm like, well, you didn't finish the story. You didn't even get to the bump bump. You didn't even get to the bump bump ba-dum bump. You got about halfway through that. So there definitely needs to be a sense of conclusion, a sense of satisfaction, a sense of closure, I guess is the better way to do it. Now, I can leave the door open for more, especially books that are parts of a series, but at least every book should have a sense of some sort of closure from that story arc. So anyway, there's some thoughts on writing book endings.